Hi, Clint Kuhns here with Anderson Business Advisors, and in this video, we are going to discuss wholetailing. Now, if you're not sure what that term means, it's flipping, going from a wholesale deal into a flipping deal. All right, with that, let's get started. All right, guys, if you watched the previous video where I talked about wholesaling properties, I discussed that I was going to show you then how to move from a wholesale into a wholetail. That is, you decided that you want to take this property down yourself, or maybe you couldn't find a buyer that would step in and you could assign that contract to them. So you realize, hey, this is a good deal. I will actually flip it myself. Or potentially you're going to treat it as a long-term hold. Well, the issue comes up is that how do I structure this? Because if you've entered into the agreement with the seller in the name of your corporation, or maybe you're using an LLC like I described in the previous video, how do you move that over to another entity, or do you do it right through your corporation? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about that. So, as you recall from the wholesaling video, here's your corp. All right, that's right here. Now, I talked about using a limited liability company to make your offers in. The benefit of that is that if you're making an offer in the name of an LLC right up here, and you decide you want to close on that property because you're not going to wholesale it, and then you want to flip it, you're actually in the prime position right here, because you never want to flip inside of your parent corporation. That's just going to be a huge mistake. That's a disaster waiting to occur. It's a minefield. So many real estate investors have made this mistake over and over again. They set up one entity and they just keep flipping through that same entity, and then disaster strikes and just screws everything up that they've been working on, building up. So a deal that they'd closed and they thought they were done 6 months ago comes back to bite them. I don't want you to be one of those clients showing up in my office saying, Clint, I knew a better way to do it and I didn't do it because I got so busy with my business. Follow these rules, set it up this way. You take title in the name of the LLC on that property, so you close in the LLC. Then the LLC, as I stated, is owned by your corporation. You're set up in the driver's seat. This deal is ready to go forwards. All you need to do now is conduct your flip through here, flip the property, bring in the cash, and then distribute that cash down to your corporation, and it'll be taxed at your corporation's tax bracket. That LLC, that doesn't have to file a tax return because it's a single member disregarded entity, which means that it only has one owner, which is a corporation, so you can set it up so it's ignored for federal tax purposes. So by using the LLC to structure your wholesale transactions, to make your offers, you're really setting yourself up to flip the property should you choose to close on it, because you got the right structure in place. Now, for those of you that are not using the LLC and you're using those short form purchase and sale agreements that allow you to assign them, then the other scenario here, what you would do is, if I had this property right here under contract with this seller and the contract ran directly to my corporation, create a limited liability company, assign your contract to the LLC, just like you would if you were dealing with a third party who you're looking to make some money from on that wholesale deal. So assign it to the LLC, and of course that LLC is owned by your corp, and then flip it through the LLC. So that's how you run from a wholesale into a wholetail with the limited liability company, all owned by your same corporation. Now, let's assume that property right there, you've rehabbed it, and now you want to turn it into a rental, or you're going to do an Airbnb or something like that. You don't want to flip the property. Or before you even did the rehab work, you realized, you know what, this would be a better scenario as a long-term hold, part of my portfolio of properties, rather than flipping it. So in that case, what I would recommend you do is hopefully make that determination before you close, all right? I mean, that's always the ideal situation. You know going into it what you're going to do with the property. But I get it, things come up, and we don't often know this ahead of time. But let's assume that we did, because we're on our game. So what you would do there is, if you watch my other videos where I talk about the benefits of a Wyoming or Delaware limited liability company, especially for rental real estate investors, you know everyone should have one of these entities in their portfolio. They should have a Wyoming LLC right here for their rentals, And what I mean by that, you're not actually owning the property there. This is providing you anonymity and asset protection is what it's doing. So if I know that I am not going to flip this property and I want to treat it as a long-term hold, then before I close, if I had adopted this strategy right here, strategy number 1, where I made the offer in the name of the LLC, what you'll want to do is assign over your LLC to your Wyoming LLC and then close on the property. Now, the only issue that may come up here is that if you need financing, if you're using Freddie Fannie financing here to take this deal down because you don't have private money lined up or you just don't have the cash to do the deal, then that's going to be a bit of a problem for you. So there will have to be an intervening step here. Assign the entity over to yourself, and you'll have to close in your own name first off, right? Because that's what they're going to require, the bank's going to require. And then when you're done, move the property back up here into that LLC owned by your Wyoming LLC for that anonymity that you're looking for. So that's how I would handle the property that I intend to add to my portfolio that I'm not going to flip. So that's option number 1. Now let's say option number 2, again, is with those short form purchase and sale agreements that provide for assignability. Again, look, you have to determine how are you going to take the property down. If it's financing, then just assign the contract to yourself. Just assign it to yourself, close in your own name with the financing, and then do what I just showed you here. Put it inside of your limited liability company. And if you're not sure about that, I've got plenty of videos on my channel that will walk you through this process and explain the benefits. Be sure to catch those. If you are going to buy it for cash, well, then you don't have to go through this process. If I used option 2, where I'm using that short form agreement, so the agreement runs to the corporation, corporation is the one that has the ability to assign that contract over. Then what I would do if I plan to buy it for cash is I would create a separate LLC over here that's owned by my Wyoming LLC. And again, we're doing that for asset protection, for anonymity. Then I would assign the contract to this LLC and I would close here, just like that. So essentially what we're doing is we're making the determination, are we going to hold it long term or are we going to flip? Flip, you can leave it right up here. Hold, move it down here. Now the one aspect I did not cover, you might be thinking about right now is, well, that's great, Clint, but I don't often think ahead. Things just come at me when I'm driving down the road or late at night. I'm like, I should really keep that property. But you're already in the situation where you're doing the rehab work through your corporation. Well, don't fret, because that happens a lot with real estate investors. In that particular situation, then what I would do there is I would sell the LLC to the Wyoming LLC, actually sell the LLC, get this, for what you paid for it, all right? So you don't create a taxable event up at the corporate level. You want to keep it neutral. So if you're invested into that property right now, your basis in that property, what you paid for it, what you rehabbed it was $150K, then sell it to the LLC for $150,000. Therefore, it's a non-taxable event to the corp, and then you can just take that money back out. Sell it on an installment sale if you don't have $150,000. Once the money hits your corp, take it out of the corporation, pay it back to yourself. Hopefully, when you're structuring these deals here with your corporation, if you're putting capital in to rehab a property, you're doing it as a loan, so you can pull all that capital back out without any negative tax ramifications. Okay, that's a key point there that you should pick up on. This needs to be structured as a loan. So if you're putting money in, structured as a loan if it's coming from you. So you repay yourself on the loan, put the money into here, and then roll it back up into there. I mean, there's so many different ways we could do this. Another way that people will do is they'll just transfer it out. If it hasn't hit a tax return yet, then they'll move the LLC out that contains the property and then treat all that activity as it happened down here and the corp was just doing the work on behalf of that LLC. That's a way to do it. Might be a little easier for you. But whatever the case is, you want to get it out of your corporation down over here into this limited liability company and holding it the right way because it's a rental property. I hope that answers your questions on how to wholetail property that you thought you were going to wholesale. My name is Clint Coons with Anderson Business Advisors. I'm wishing you the very best with your investing.